What's one thing you wish you never saw? Serious. A few years ago me and a friend were leaving a bar in downtown Toronto at like 2 AM and some M-head tried to jump us. Being drunk and not knowing that M makes you a freaking psycho, we tried to take him on. He drove a 4-inch knife into my friend's gut and ran off. The sight of my friend's innards spilling out of his stomach and him trying to put them back in total shock is burned into my mind. He's fine, and he earned the nickname Spaghetti. While in the army, a friend committed suicide by slicing his own throat. I was sent to check on him and found him. He was still barely alive. He died in my arms. The looks on his face haunt me still. The look of regret and fear. I went to see my cousin a few days before he died of stage 4 esophageal cancer. I'll never forget the way he looked. It was like someone draped a skin-colored sheet over a skeleton. It's hard to remember all the amazing times when that's the last memory you have of someone. God dang dude, so sorry to hear that. My dad also died of esophageal cancer, and the way you described that was absolutely spot on. Frick cancer, stay strong. There was a video last year where some thugs were beating 2 teens to death with rocks and steel rods, and their mother was begging and sobbing for them to stop. The worst part? The public did absolutely nothing about it. Some of them were even filming them die. The police didn't do crap. Horrible. The city was Sialkot, Pakistan. That's really messed up. My dad, after he hung himself, I found him down by the river in a spot he used to take me as a kid. Maybe he went there because it was a happy spot for him, but of course that doesn't help you. I'm really sad that you had to go through that. My wife, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. It made every reference to someone losing their mind at the sight of something in literature and fiction suddenly make sense. I literally felt like I was going insane. 4 years now, and I still feel that sense of awfulness anytime I think about it. I came home to my dad on his knees right beside the stairs cradling one of our kittens about 30 seconds after he had accidentally stepped on it and broke its neck walking down the stairs. He was bawling and apologizing to it over and over. Then I sat with him and my mom in the bathroom while he cried so much more. He's the sweetest man I know, and I know how much it broke his heart. He hates himself a little for it, and that kills me. OMG, all these posts, and this is the one that made me tear up. I can imagine it so well. Your poor dad. I came home late after a long 8-hour drive and there was a stray cat that lived under our house with a litter of kittens. The kittens were super friendly and super curious. When I was carrying my things into the house, I closed the car door with my foot really hard to make sure it closed properly, but it never made the sound that it actually did close. I turn around and see that I completely closed the door on one of the kitten's head, and I watched its last moments as it seized all over the ground, crying, and the mom came over and was sniffing at it till it died. I was so mortified and buried the kitten that night in our backyard. Sniff. An old man died in my arms, completely randomly while walking down the street, though I am glad I was there to catch him when he fell. Thinking about his last breath still gives me chills. You know, I understand this was traumatizing for you, but I think you did a good thing. If I am alone when I die, I'd want nothing more than another human to share the last moment with. My dad unconscious, covered in blood and glass while seeing my little sister panic. I would have been about 5/6 at the time and my sister 4/5 at the time. My dad was taking a shortcut home from my grandparents' place when a stupid young couple, P-plates, were going way over the speed limit, cut around a corner and T-boned our car. We rolled for a bit, and then the ditch and Kaufland stopped us. I got a sprained neck with really bad whiplash and bruises, while my sister Katie just got a stomachache and bruises from the seatbelt restraining her, which by the way was the only seatbelt that actually stopped. Now at that age, I had no freaking clue what the term unconscious was, and from what my little sister and I saw, we really did think he was dead. I was so freaking scared. The area we were in was so freaking isolated, barely any cars can pass. Some cars even just drove past. I was still trying to take in what just happened. I must have been in shock or something because I remember feeling so choked up. I wanted to reassure my sister, but I was so scared. Our car had pretty much landed upside down. I couldn't get out because my side was covered up by the ditch, but eventually my sister got out of one of the doors or windows on the other side. Hazy memory, sorry. She screamed at the first car that came near us. Luckily this car pulled over for us. An elderly woman got Katie in their car and called the ambulance and fire brigades, while the woman and her husband, I assumed, were going about that. 2 men ran over to our car. They went to get me out first, but I refused. I needed to see them get my dad out first. The window on my dad's door had pretty much shattered, so the men pulled him out through there and laid him on a picnic blanket from what I remember. The men got me out after that. My dad and I had to go to the hospital and Katie got to go in the fire truck. My mother was distraught when she got the call. I honestly just wanted to know that my dad was okay and not in fact dead. My dad was in a pretty banged up shape. The car door had concaved on his side on the car and broke his right hip, as well as 3 ribs, but after 6 months of recovery he got to come back home. I was helping my dad with his computer last week and had to take it home to fix. I come across a picture folder labeled wow, so of course I click on it to see what's doing. Worst mistake ever. It was pictures of my 60-year-old mom spreading her snatch with her fingers like P-stars do. That image will be forever burned into my brain, unfortunately. With the title named wow on a dad's computer, I'd like to believe I'd know better than to look. There was a photographer in the early 1900s who would pose crime scene photos and then take pictures of them. I'm sure someone here knows his name, but I refuse to Google him for fear of running across the black and white photograph of a large naked man sitting in his bathroom with no head. I happened upon a book of his work in Barnes & Noble 15 or so years ago and was flipping through it, and that photo was huge. I can't get the sight of his severed exposed neck out of my mind. Oh my god, I saw that same dang photo in that same dang book in a Borders or B&N years ago. I stood there flipping through the photos, saw that and put the book away in a hurry. Then I looked around to see if anyone saw me looking at the photos in that book. No idea why I did that, but I remember doing it. I was ashamed of myself. There was a video on Facebook of about 20 sweet little chicks sitting in a metal basin tub thing, chirping happily away. I was expecting a cute video, and then someone flicks a switch, and suddenly the delightful balls of yellow fluff, the chicks, are shredded down into a gloopy red pulp. You can hear them squealing, singing their final somber tunes. That was sad, very sad. Obviously not as bad as what some people are going to say, but it was pretty horrific. No, that's actually pretty bad. Rotten.com. It was the 90s. The internet was new and wild. Discovering crazy new web pages was a daily routine at work, and lo and behold, one fateful day I stumbled upon Rotten.com. I saw pictures of things that still haunt me to this day. Do not want. On the plus side, it taught me early on to be careful and think about it before I go ahead and click that next link. For example, I've never seen 2 girls 1 cup, and I never will. Also in the never seen 2 girls 1 cup and never will group. My father dying a week ago. I know I'm not the only one who's seen that happen, but Jesus Christ, I wish I hadn't. I have a hard time recalling any happy memories with him now because of it. A long while ago, I was browsing our WTF's news section. Now, you know how sometimes you're browsing out of boredom, and you read something, but your mind doesn't really register it, and you just click anyway? That's what happened with me. Someone posted an image of 2 dudes double penetrating a rotting corpse in the middling stages of decomposition. Apparently, the mods also thought this was too much for our WTF, because I'm pretty sure that crap got deleted. It is burned into my memory, and I saw the image for only maybe 3 seconds. It is the only thing on our WTF to ever make me nearly gag, and thinking about it even now makes my stomach churn. If I could, I'd go my entire life without ever having seen that image for even a moment. Oddly, I want to see it, just to say I had seen it. I just saw a video on Facebook of a woman in a red hoodie throwing puppies in a rushing river. She's very much enjoying herself. It made me sick to my stomach because the puppies seem fairly young and are whimpering. I was 11/12 years old. I was riding my bike. I watched a car run over a toddler that had run out in the road. I will never forget the pop when the wheels rolled over his head. Done with this thread now. Hearing choking noises coming from my mom's bedroom with no response from her. Kicked down the door to find her with her eyes rolled into the back of her head, choking on her vomit and purple. She stopped breathing. I tried CPR. Ruptured brain aneurysm. Fun stuff. When I was 17 I used to live in Sturgis. I got a job during the motorcycle rally. Had to clean crap people left behind at the outdoor bar at 3 in the morning. One morning I heard a scream. Looked over the fence to see a woman being beaten and raped by 2 guys. The police station was close by so the police were there really fast. Wish I never saw it. The video of a guy getting his head chopped off by a chainsaw. I think it was by a Mexican cartel. I am forever desensitized because of that, and I wish I wasn't. Oh man, I saw that too. Very disturbing if you understand what they are saying also. A hip replacement operation, in person. An operation to fix a woman who has suffered from genitalia maltreatment, aka her clitoris was removed and she was sewn back to let one small hole. I have no clue how to call that. I'm not speaking English as a first language. Help me please. Last but not least, a woman being told by a doctor that her lifelong partner just died. It's known as female genital mutilation and just reading the Wikipedia page about it made me feel very ill. I can't imagine seeing it. Naked pics and messages my wife sent to another man. It was only a couple weeks ago and I have been a wreck ever since. Hospitalized for crapping, puking blood, dehydration, exhaustion. I have lost 25 pounds and still can barely eat, can't sleep. My son is only thing I live for. Worst thing is that I have known her for 25 years. Never thought for a moment she had it in her to lie, cheat, inflict the pain like she did. Our life together was good. This came out of nowhere and is literally killing me slowly and painfully. Seeing the pics and the conversations she had with him, I can't get them out of my mind. My biggest fear ever. I would have gone through those exact symptoms. Also with traumatic dreams to go with it. It's unfair what happened to you. I was on Facebook and saw someone like this video which had a cartel member cut off some lady's head with a machete. Facebook is just getting weird. Was sitting at an intersection riding shotgun with my son's mother and my son in the backseat when he was 3 weeks old, about 6 years ago. There were 3 girls, about 17 years old from the look of them, walking across the intersection. They were walking basically toward our car in the most surreal way though. They were all laughing and having fun like regular teenagers, even though the weather was a little crappy, walking with their arms interlocked. I remember thinking that they looked like something out of a cheesy butt movie about teenagers out screwing around. I remember thinking right as they walked in front of this big blue Dodge truck that the guy driving it was looking at them in a really creepy way. Guy just had a dirtbag look about him, 50 years old or so with grimy hair and old crappy looming glasses. He just looked like a creep. So the fun time girls are walking in front of the guy at the red light and he revs his engine at them. I think he legitimately intended to startle them and just goose the truck forward a little, but he fricked up and let it jump too far forward. The girl on the outside of the line go pushed but walked away. The girl in the middle got knocked down. But I can still very clearly see the top of the grill smashing the first girl's face and knocking her about 8 feet away. I made my son's mom pull over and ran over to her to keep her from moving because I didn't know if her neck was broke or anything. Her face was on the ground though, and she's screaming, "Why'd you do that?" I'm guessing screaming at the guy cause she knew he did it intentionally. I pulled my hoodie off and helped lift her head a little and put it under her face so it wasn't grinding on the ground. I'll never forget seeing the blood just freaking pouring onto that grey hoodie when I slid it under her. Turned out the people behind the guy that did it were both M's. One of them made sure the guy couldn't leave and the other started helping the girl. My son's mom had called the cops and they were apparently close by cause they were Johnny on the spot. They took a statement from me and that's all I ever heard on the matter. I remember getting so upset later when I was home feeding him a bottle. It's weird to think that you raise your kids and some butthole might come along and frick them up for no other reason than trying to be a dong. When I was about 13 years old, my friends and I were hanging out at the plaza across from my building. We were sitting across a drug mart. A man walks by and says, "Hey, girls." He was walking by with his penis sticking out at us. I was also flashed when I was younger, about 9 years old. The guy pulled up next to my friend and me while we were rollerblading and got out of his car with his dong in his hand. I actually thought it was hilarious at the time, but my friend was mortified and started crying. Probably a healthier response than mine, but whatever. Sorry you also had to experience an unwarranted wiener. I've posted this before, but I think it is definitely the one thing I wish I had never seen. I was driving up to visit my friends who went to Indiana University, which is about 2 hours away from where I go to school. The drive was going well. It was midday and the skies were clear. I was going to make it to their place a little earlier than expected. Once I exited the highway, I was in a small town with a 2-lane state road running through it. After stopping to get some gas, I started back on my trip. At this point I was about 45 minutes away from my U. But a few minutes after I had gotten back on the road, a Ford 4x4 plowed into a car that was a few drivers ahead of me, a blue 90s hatchback Civic. The 4x4 flew across the road, tumbling. I can still remember the contents of the truck bed flying out and destroying a white fence that was at least 50 yards away from the road. The Civic spun across the road, looking as if someone had just removed the front left of the car because of how badly it was hit. I immediately pulled my car over and called 911. I got out of my car to see if anyone was hurt, and that's when I saw him. The driver of the 4x4, probably in his mid-50s, sprawled out on the road. I ran over to him to see if there was anything I could do, but when I got close to him I saw that his leg and arm had been broken and part of his head had caved in. His eyes were still open, completely lifeless, but I couldn't tell if he was breathing. I stood there for a minute and just looked at him. I had no idea what to do, so I walked away slowly to see if the other driver was okay. By the time I got to the Civic there was already another guy there, a nurse, and he told me to not come any closer. I didn't hear his warning and moved closer. By the time he said it again, it was too late. I had already seen the driver. His legs were gone, crushed under the engine that had been shoved into the driver's seat. His entire body was covered in blood. Luckily, I guess, he was the only person in the car. Not the same case with the 4x4. I looked back to the red 4x4 and saw an old woman walk out, her face covered in blood. My heart sank. It had to be his wife. But once she was out of the truck, she pulled out a child, probably 6 to 8 years old. The kid was fine, only bruises, but I will never forget the look of terror on his face. Once the police showed up, I was interviewed about the accident, what I had seen, who was at fault. They left me alone in the car for about 30 minutes while they went to talk to the wife of the man in the 4x4. When they came back they told me the cause of the accident. The kid's grandfather, the man from the 4x4, had seen a plane flying overhead and was pointing it out to his grandson when he slowly drifted into the other lane. The webpage called Offended on Encyclopedia Dramatica. It's bad. Don't go there. I did because of curiosity from someone else saying this and I wish I hadn't. I'm not very squeamish, but it's every picture that you don't want to look at. I shouldn't even spread word of its existence. I once saw a very sweet mentally disabled man completely covered in his own feces, including some in his mouth and hair. Took me well over an hour to clean up and had me down in the dumps for the next couple of days. Better than being covered in the dumps. My first line of C back in the 80s. Side but happy note, on February the 6th I will have 18 years clean and sober. Child P. I work in law enforcement. New throwaway every time because I like my job. Worst thing I ever saw was repeated amounts of child P. So many different videos and pictures. Not like 14-year-old girls. Like 6-year-old girls, some boys, and grown butt men. Haven't seen a woman yet. I get horrible nightmares thinking about it. Thank you to all you doctors, therapists, victim psychologists, pharmacists, and anyone dealing with child services. Looking down after being hit by a truck and seeing the following. The middle of my left mandible, with 2 teeth, on the road. My right femur burst open like an overcooked bratwurst, marrow smeared on the road. 3 other complex fractures, 1 protruding through my jeans. The motorcycle I had just installed $1,000 worth of custom seating and bags on in 3 pieces. The enormous vehicle of the drunk, wealthy woman who had hit me, and the look of denial on her face. Jesus Christ. It seems surreal that someone who suffered from the described injuries is alive to type about it. I hope when you got done with her, she wasn't wealthy anymore. My 10-year-old brother brain dead and on life support after having an aneurysm. Our whole extended family drove 2 hours to be there on his final night. It was an agonizing night, as we took turns saying our goodbyes 2 at a time. We took him off life support the next day. What I will never get out of my head is his tongue hanging out of his mouth to make room for the breathing tube down his throat. I'll never forget my stepsister's mother hugging me and crying and telling me how sorry she was that I'd had to lose both of my little brothers. That's when it hurt the most, I think. I'm a crime reporter, so I've seen some pretty gruesome stuff. Thing is, I usually know what I'm getting into, so I have time to mentally prepare myself for the specter. There was a guy who brutally beat a woman and her child. He savaged the mother to within an inch of her life, then found her 10-year-old son, who was hiding under his bed. He proceeded to punch, kick and stab the boy while his mother bled on the couch. She could hear everything. This was a plea hearing, so I hadn't expected to hear all the details of the case. Then the judge showed pictures of the dead child, all green, purple and grey with so many stab wounds it begged belief. I felt sick to my stomach. I had a few stiff drinks that night. Why the frick do I come to these threads? So much fricked up crap. I feel bad for all these people regardless of how bad it was comparably. Thus video of 3 kids killing a man with a hammer. They hit him multiple times, he didn't die, so they poked his brain and eyes. The worst part, it was 100% real, and all the while, you could hear the man crying and choking on his own blood. I came home from school one night. I was about 8 or 9. I noticed a lump in the driveway. It being dark, I walked closer only to discover that it was my beloved cat butchered to pieces. Eyes were gouged out, stab wounds all over, rectum was pulled out, blood everywhere. It was horrific. I cried for months. My sick 10-year-old neighbor was the one who did it. Watched a motorcyclist get hit by a car and promptly had his head removed. Head landed in the backseat on the lap of an 8-year-old girl. Car stopped. Girl hopped out. Bathed everywhere. Head rolled up and stopped about 3 feet from me. A few minutes later motorcyclist's wife ran over screaming and picked up dude's head. As she turned around her entire back had been scraped off from where she slid 50 or so feet down the road after being thrown from the bike. She then put it back on her husband's body and started screaming at him to get up. That's about the extent of what my shrink has pulled out of me during the therapy sessions. Yeah, so I'm officially never getting a motorcycle. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.